The Lagos rain fell like judgment, each drop a cold slap against the windshield of the moving taxi. Chioma Nwachukwu pressed a trembling hand to the sleek window of the airport taxi. Her reflection a ghost over the glittering wet chaos of Incheon International Airport. The lights of Seoul blurred into streaks of gold and white, a stark, ordered galaxy away from the humid, vibrant chaos of Lagos. Her heart was a frantic drum solo against her ribs, a rhythm of pure, unadulterated fear. She wasn't just arriving in Korea. She was evaporating, leaving behind the perfume of her old life, iodine from the clinic where she worked as a nurse, the cloying, expensive cologne of her ex-fiancé, Emeka, and beneath it all, the coppery, persistent scent of her own fear. 48 hours ago, she had been planning a wedding. 24 hours ago, she had been hiding a bruised wrist under a wide bracelet, smiling through a fractured soul at a bridal shower. 6 hours ago, she had emptied her bank account, used a burner phone to book a one-way ticket to the only place Emeka's connections didn't reach, and walked out of her own life with a single suitcase. It held her nursing credentials, a few photos of her late parents, and the vibrant, flowing dresses that felt like armor against the world. The rest, the apartment, the car, the future, she left to the flames. Now, shivering in the Korean spring chill that bit through her thin Ankara-wrap dress, she felt the weight of the unknown crush down. Her plan was tissue paper thin. Find a cheap goshawan, a tiny studio, use her near-flawless English and desperate hustle to find any nursing-adjacent work, and disappear. She followed signs to the airport limousine bus, clutching her suitcase like a lifeline. The bus depot was less crowded, a concrete cavern echoing with announcements in a language that was all sharp angles and soft curves she couldn't decipher. And that's when she saw him. A silhouette against the bright convenience store light. Tall, immaculate in a black wool coat that screamed silent money. His hair was dark, perfectly styled, and his posture was that of a man who owned the very air around him. He wasn't looking at her. He was on the phone, his voice a low, calm river of Korean. But his eyes swept the area like a scanner, missing nothing. They passed over her, paused for a millisecond, and moved on. Yet in that pause Chioma felt seen, catalogued. A new kind of cold seeped into her bones. This was not Emeka's brand of hot-headed fury. This was something deeper, more calculated. The predator who doesn't need to chase. She hurried onto the waiting bus, finding a seat near the back. As the bus pulled out, her eyes drifted to the window. The man in the black coat was gone. A sigh of relief misted the glass. It was just paranoia, the jumpiness of a hunted animal. Seoul was a city of 10 million. She was a ghost. The goshawan in the Itaewon district was a closet with a window, but it was clean. For 3 days, Chioma lived on convenience store kimbap and terror. Every footstep in the hall, every raised voice in the street made her freeze. She spent her days walking into clinics and hospitals, her translated credentials in hand, only to be met with polite, implacable barriers. Licensing issues, language requirements, endless paperwork. The money was bleeding away. On the 4th night, the fear curdled into loneliness. She needed to hear a voice, any voice that wasn't in her head. She needed to feel like a person, not a fugitive. She found a bar down a quieter alley. Not a flashy club, but a speakeasy-style place called The Velvet Thread. Felt hidden, safe. Inside it was warm, dimly lit with amber lights, the sound of smooth jazz a balm on her raw nerves. She slid onto a plush stool at the bar, ordering a simple gin and tonic. For the first time since she landed, her shoulders dropped half an inch. She didn't see him arrive. One moment the space beside her was empty, the next, he was there, a sudden solid presence that changed the atmospheric pressure of the room. It was him. The man from the airport. Close, he was more devastating. Sharp jawline, a mouth that held no hint of a smile, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light. He didn't look at her. He ordered a neat whiskey in flawless, quiet Korean to the bartender, who served him with a deference that bordered on fear. Chioma's blood turned to ice. Her fight or flight screamed, a siren in her veins. This was no coincidence. He had found her. Emika found me was her only shattered thought. She fumbled for her purse, her drink sloshing, ready to bolt. His voice stopped her. It was low, calm, and spoken in perfect, unaccented English. I am not him. She froze, her breath catching. He finally turned his head, those obsidian eyes meeting hers. There was no warmth, but there was a terrifying intensity. The man you are running from. I am not him. And I am not the police. Who are you? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the jazz. My name is Kim Min-Jun. He didn't offer a hand. He took a slow sip of his whiskey. You arrived on flight KE-074 from Lagos. You stay at the Blue Star Goshawan. You have visited 7 medical facilities in 4 days. He listed her movements with chilling precision. You are skilled, desperate, and incredibly visible to the wrong people. Your ex-fiancé, Emika Dyke, has hired a private investigator. Sloppy one. He arrived in Seoul this afternoon. The room tilted. Her worst fear, confirmed by a stranger. Tears of sheer panic pricked her eyes. She was out of time, out of options, out of hope. Min-Jun watched her. His expression unreadable. He placed his glass down with a soft, definitive click. I can make you disappear. Truly disappear. From him. From the investigator. From everyone. Why? She choked out. What do you want from me? A long, silent moment passed. He let her question hang in the smoky air. Finally, he gestured to her untouched drink. Then he said the words that would change everything. His voice a vow wrapped in a threat. I won't touch you. Have one drink. Listen to my proposal. That is all I ask tonight. But if you walk out that door now, you will not see sunrise before Dyke's man finds you. Chioma's hand trembled on her glass. To stay was to step into the lion's den. To leave was to be run down by the hyenas. The gin and tonic sat between them, a bubbling, poisonous sea. Did she dare take a sip? Did she dare hear him out? Her next decision would seal her fate. The jazz saxophone wailed, a sound that now felt like a funeral dirge. Chioma's fingers were locked around the cool glass of her gin and tonic, her knuckles white. Kim Min-Jun's words hung in the air, not a request but a gravitational force. You will not see sunrise. She believed him. The absolute, calm certainty in his eyes brooked no argument. This was not a man who bluffed. She took a breath, the first one that felt like it reached her lungs in minutes. Then, with a defiance she didn't feel, she took a long, slow sip of her drink. The bitter tang of the gin grounded her. It was a decision. A tiny, terrifying act of agency. Talk, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. The Lagos rain fell like judgment, each drop a cold slap against the windshield of the moving taxi. Chioma Nwachukwu pressed a trembling hand to the sleek window of the airport taxi. Her reflection a ghost over the glittering, wet chaos of Incheon International Airport. The lights of Seoul blurred into streaks of gold and white, a stark, ordered galaxy away from the humid, vibrant chaos of Lagos. Her heart was a frantic drum solo against her ribs, a rhythm of pure, unadulterated fear. She wasn't just arriving in Korea. She was evaporating, leaving behind the perfume of her old life, iodine from the clinic where she worked as a nurse, the cloying, expensive cologne of her ex-fiancé, Emika, and beneath it all, the coppery, persistent scent of her own fear. 48 hours ago, she had been planning a wedding. 24 hours ago, she had been hiding a bruised wrist under a wide bracelet, smiling through a fractured soul at a bridal shower. 6 hours ago, she had emptied her bank account, used a burner phone to book a one-way ticket to the only place Emika's connections didn't reach, and walked out of her own life with a single suitcase. It held her nursing credentials, a few photos of her late parents, and the vibrant, flowing dresses that felt like armor against the world. The rest, the apartment, the car, the future, she left to the flames. Now, shivering in the Korean spring chill that bit through her thin Ankara-wrapped dress, she felt the weight of the unknown crush down. Her plan was tissue paper thin. Find a cheap goshawan, a tiny studio, use her near-flawless English and desperate hustle to find any nursing-adjacent work, and disappear. She followed signs to the airport limousine bus, clutching her suitcase like a lifeline. The bus depot was less crowded, a concrete cavern echoing with announcements in a language that was all sharp angles and soft curves she couldn't decipher. And that's when she saw him. A silhouette against the bright convenience store light. Tall, immaculate in a black wool coat that screamed silent money. His hair was dark, perfectly styled, and his posture was that of a man who owned the very air around him. He wasn't looking at her. He was on the phone, his voice a low, calm river of Korean. But his eyes swept the area like a scanner, missing nothing. They passed over her, paused for a millisecond, and moved on. Yet in that pause Chioma felt seen, catalogued. A new kind of cold seeped into her bones. This was not Emika's brand of hot-headed fury. This was something deeper, more calculated. The predator who doesn't need to chase. She hurried onto the waiting bus, finding a seat near the back. As the bus pulled out, her eyes drifted to the window. The man in the black coat was gone. A sigh of relief misted the glass. It was just paranoia, the jumpiness of a hunted animal. Seoul was a city of 10 million. She was a ghost. The Goshawan in the Itaewon district was a closet with a window, but it was clean. For 3 days, Chioma lived on convenience store kimbap and terror. Every footstep in the hall, every raised voice in the street made her freeze. She spent her days walking into clinics and hospitals, her translated credentials in hand, only to be met with polite, implacable barriers. Licensing issues, language requirements, endless paperwork. The money was bleeding away. On the 4th night, the fear curdled into loneliness. She needed to hear a voice, any voice that wasn't in her head. She needed to feel like a person, not a fugitive. She found a bar down a quieter alley. Not a flashy club, but a speakeasy-style place called The Velvet Thread. Felt hidden, safe. Inside it was warm, dimly lit with amber lights, the sound of smooth jazz a bomb on her raw nerves. She slid onto a plush stool at the bar, ordering a simple gin and tonic. For the first time since she landed, her shoulders dropped half an inch. She didn't see him arrive. One moment the space beside her was empty, the next, he was there, a sudden solid presence that changed the atmospheric pressure of the room. It was him. The man from the airport. Close, he was more devastating. Sharp jawline, a mouth that held no hint of a smile, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light. He didn't look at her. He ordered a neat whiskey in flawless, quiet Korean to the bartender, who served him with a deference that bordered on fear. Chioma's blood turned to ice. Her fight or flight screamed, a siren in her veins. This was no coincidence. He had found her. Emika found me was her only shattered thought. She fumbled for her purse, her drink sloshing, ready to bolt. His voice stopped her. It was low, calm, and spoken in perfect, unaccented English. I am not him. She froze, her breath catching. He finally turned his head, those obsidian eyes meeting hers. There was no warmth, but there was a terrifying intensity. The man you are running from. I am not him. And I am not the police. Who are you? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the jazz. My name is Kim Min-Jun. He didn't offer a hand. He took a slow sip of his whiskey. You arrived on flight KE074 from Lagos. You stay at the Blue Star Goshawan. You have visited 7 medical facilities in 4 days. He listed her movements with chilling precision. You are skilled, desperate, and incredibly visible to the wrong people. Your ex-fiancé, Emika Dyke, has hired a private investigator. Sloppy one. He arrived in Seoul this afternoon. The room tilted. Her worst fear, confirmed by a stranger. Tears of sheer panic pricked her eyes. She was out of time, out of options, out of hope. Min-Jun watched her. His expression unreadable. He placed his glass down with a soft, definitive click. I can make you disappear. Truly disappear. From him. From the investigator. From everyone. Why? She choked out. What do you want from me? A long silent moment passed. He let her question hang in the smoky air. Finally, he gestured to her untouched drink. Then he said the words that would change everything. His voice a vow wrapped in a threat. I won't touch you. Have one drink. Listen to my proposal. That is all I ask tonight. But if you walk out that door now, you will not see sunrise before Dyke's man finds you. Chioma's hand trembled on her glass. To stay was to step into the lion's den. To leave was to be run down by the hyenas. The gin and tonic sat between them, a bubbling poisonous sea. Did she dare take a sip? Did she dare hear him out? Her next decision would seal her fate. The jazz saxophone wailed, a sound that now felt like a funeral dirge. Chioma's fingers were locked around the cool glass of her gin and tonic, her knuckles white. Kim Min-Jun's words hung in the air, not a request but a gravitational force. You will not see sunrise. She believed him. The absolute, calm certainty in his eyes brooked no argument. This was not a man who bluffed. She took a breath, the first one that felt like it reached her lungs in minutes. Then, with a defiance she didn't feel, she took a long, slow sip of her drink. The bitter tang of the gin grounded her. It was a decision. A tiny, terrifying act of agency. Talk, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. He then opened the door next to Halmiani's. It was a spacious room with its own bathroom, furnished with clean-lined, comfortable furniture. A large window looked out over a walled garden. On the bed lay a set of simple, high-quality gray linen scrubs. Your room. The intercom connects directly to Halmiani's room and to my study. Use it only if necessary. Your personal belongings will be brought up. The clothes you brought are unsuitable for your duties. These are provided. Chioma felt a hot spark of indignation. Unsuitable. My clothes are fine. Min-Jun's eyes cooled another degree. They are memorable. Vibrant. You are no longer a person who wishes to be seen or remembered. You are a ghost in this house. You will dress like one. It is for your safety as much as my discretion. He delivered the edict without malice, a simple fact. Your old life, including its colors, stays outside. He turned to leave, then paused. One more rule. Do not wander. The house has security systems that are unforgiving to the uninitiated. Stay in this wing, the garden, or the kitchen. Good night, Nurse Nwachukwu. And he was gone, his footsteps silent on the polished floor. The first week was a study in silent adjustment. Halmiani, Mrs. Kim, was a delicate woman with eyes that held fragments of the sharpness her son possessed, now clouded by a gentle confusion. She spoke little English, and Chioma's Korean was basic, but they found a language in gestures, smiles, and the universal rhythms of care. Halmiani liked her tea sweet, enjoyed the feel of the sun on her hands in the garden, and sometimes called Chioma Sujin, a name from her past. Chioma didn't correct her. Min-Jun was a ghost in his own home. She saw him only in passing, a glimpse of him heading to his sealed wing early in the morning, or sometimes late at night. He would silently check on his mother, standing in the doorway as Chioma read to her. They never spoke. He was a shadow, but his presence was the gravitational center of the house, pulling all silence and tension toward him. Chioma felt the walls of her gilded cage not as bars, but as a suffocating, silent vacuum. She was safe, well-fed, paid, and utterly, profoundly alone. She missed the loud, affirming laughter of her friends in Lagos, the booming music, the defiant joy of her colorful clothes. Here she was a gray mouse in a granite maze. The tension broke on the 8th night. A storm lashed against the huge windows. Chioma, unable to sleep, went to the kitchen for water. She moved quietly in the dark, familiar now with the layout. As she passed the sealed corridor to Min-Jun's wing, she heard it, a low, guttural groan of pain, followed by the shattering of glass. Her nurse's instinct overrode every rule. She typed the code she'd seen him use, she had a knack for remembering numbers, and the door clicked open. She hurried down a stark hallway toward the light spilling from an open door. The scene was not what she expected. This was a private study, all dark wood and books. Min-Jun was half slumped against his desk. His face ashen, beads of sweat on his temple. A shattered whiskey glass lay at his feet. His left hand was clamped over his right lower abdomen, and even in the dim light, she could see the dark, wet stain seeping through his black shirt. He looked up as she entered, his eyes blazing with pain and fury. "Get out!" The command was a weak snarl. "You're bleeding. You need help," she said, her professional tone automatic, stepping closer. "I said get out." He tried to straighten, a knife of pain making him gasp. Chioma didn't retreat. She saw the man now, not just the boss. The vulnerability beneath the invincible armor. "You hired a nurse," she stated firmly, walking to him. "So let me nurse. Is it a gunshot? Stabbing?" He stared at her, defiance warring with agony. "Knife. A cello. But it needs closing." "Then sit down," she ordered, pointing to a leather chair. "Where is your first aid kit? A proper one." 10 minutes later, she had him shirtless in the chair, an advanced trauma kit open beside her. The wound was, as he said, a shallow but long slash, messy and bleeding persistently. Her hands were steady as she cleaned, disinfected, and began to suture. The room was silent except for his ragged breathing and the howl of the storm outside. "You disobeyed a direct order," he muttered. His head leaned back, eyes closed. "You were dying in your study. It would have been bad for employee morale," she quipped, focusing on her stitches. The familiarity of the medical task steadied her. A faint, pained sound escaped him. Almost a laugh. "You are not afraid. Of you. Right now you're just my patient. And my patients don't scare me." She tied off the suture with practiced efficiency. "But the person who did this should be afraid. You need antibiotics. Do you have any?" He nodded weakly toward a drawer. As she retrieved the pills, he spoke again, his voice softer. "You ask no questions." "It's not my business," she said, handing him water and pills. "My business is keeping my primary patient's son alive so he can sign my paychecks." He swallowed the pills, his dark eyes studying her face with a new, unsettling intensity. The storm raged. In this secluded room, the walls between boss and employee, captor and captive, had just developed a crack. As she finished bandaging his torso, her fingers brushing against the hard planes of his stomach, a jolt of something electric and entirely unprofessional passed between them. Min-Jun's hand shot up, not to push her away, but to grasp her wrist. His grip was firm, hot. His eyes locked onto hers, the pain replaced by a deep, swirling chaos. The air vanished from the room. "You should be afraid, Chioma," he whispered, his voice a rough caress against the storm. "Because now I am starting to see you." What had she just unleashed? The silence after his words was louder than the storm. His hand was a brand around her wrist, his touch not painful but possessive, grounding. The electricity that shot up her arm had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a dangerous, forbidden awareness. She saw him now, truly saw him. The sheen of sweat on his collarbone, the ripple of muscle under her trailing bandage, the stark vulnerability and power warring in his eyes. Chioma gently but firmly pulled her wrist back. The nurse reasserting control. "You have a fever starting. The infection is setting in. You need to rest." Her voice was clinical, a wall she desperately built between them. Min-Jun let her go, his hand falling back to his side, but his gaze never wavered. That unsettling intensity remained. "You are dismissed," he said, the command returning, though laced with a new roughness. She gathered the bloody gauze and supplies, her movements efficient. At the door she paused without looking back. "Take the antibiotics every 8 hours. I'll check the wound in the morning. Don't make me break in again." She didn't wait for a reply. She fled to the sanctity of her gray room, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had touched the dragon. And for a second she had felt its heat, not just its danger. The next morning, the house was back to its silent order. But the axis had tilted. When she brought Halmione her morning tea, Min-Jun was there, sitting with his mother, speaking to her in soft Korean. He wore a crisp white shirt, hiding the bandage beneath. He looked pale but composed. His eyes met Chioma's over his mother's head. No acknowledgement of the night. No thanks. Just that same heavy look. "Good morning, Nurse Nwachukwu," he said formally. "Good morning, Mr. Kim. Halmione." She went about her duties, feeling his gaze on her back. Days passed. The careful distance was maintained, but it was now a thin veneer over the crack that had formed. He began to appear more frequently during her time with his mother, often under the pretext of checking on her, but his eyes would find Chioma. He started asking small, pointed questions. Does she sleep through the night? Does the new medication seem to affect her appetite? The questions were about his mother, but the attention was on Chioma. One afternoon, while walking with Halmione in the walled garden, Chioma found a small, thriving patch of Nigerian fluted pumpkin leaves, ugu, growing in a corner. She stared, astonished. It was impossible. Min-Jun had it planted, Halmione said in halting English, noticing her surprise. She patted Chioma's hand. He said, "For taste of home for you." Chioma felt a confusing lump in her throat. It was a gesture of staggering thoughtfulness, a recognition of her humanity, from a man who dealt in threats and shadows. It was also a terrifying reminder that he saw everything, calculated everything, even her homesickness. That evening, as she prepared Halmione's dinner in the kitchen, Min-Jun entered. He was alone. He leaned against the countertop, watching her chop vegetables. "The ugu," she said, not looking up. "Thank you." "It was nothing," he replied, his voice low. "My mother likes to see things grow." They stood in silence, the only sound the knife on the board. The tension was a living thing between them. "You never ask about your ex," Min-Jun said suddenly. "Are you not curious if he is still looking?" The knife stilled. "I assume if he was a threat you'd tell me." The investigator gave up. Dyke recalled him. "He thinks you are in Europe." Relief, so profound it made her knees weak, washed over her. For the first time since landing, the immediate clawing fear of Emeka receded. She looked at Min-Jun, truly looked. "Thank you." "He is a fool," Min-Jun said, his eyes darkening. "To have something of value and treat it so carelessly." He pushed off the counter and took a step closer. The space between them crackled. "You are safe here, Chioma." From him. "But you must understand. Safety in my world comes with chains. Beautiful, strong, inescapable chains." He reached out but not to touch her. He picked up a discarded ugu leaf from the counter, his fingers brushing hers. Spark. "The rules still stand. But the man who made them." He trailed off, his gaze dropping to her lips for a heartbeat before he stepped back, the mask of control slamming back into place. "Enjoy your dinner." He left her in the kitchen, her heart pounding, the ghost of his touch on her hand, and the terrifying realization taking root. The greatest danger in this fortress was no longer outside its walls. It was the slow, inexorable pull she felt toward its master. The cage was becoming a sanctuary, and the jailer was becoming something else entirely. The walk to Min-Jun's study felt like a march to an execution. The vibrant yellow gelly in the box felt like a poisonous flower, a piece of her past life sent to taint her present. The earring was from a pair Emeka had given her, one she'd lost during a particularly violent argument. He'd kept it. Trophy. Min-Jun's study was no longer just a room. It was a command center humming with silent fury. He stood by the window, his back to her, a silhouette against the Seoul skyline. Two other men in dark suits stood rigidly nearby. The air was frigid. "Close the door," he said without turning. She did. He finally faced her, and the look in his eyes was pure, unadulterated menace. This was not the man who'd shared a quiet moment in the kitchen. This was the Petke boss. "Explain this," he commanded, his voice a whip crack. "I can't," Chioma said, her voice trembling despite her effort to control it. "I have no idea how he got this address. No one knew I was coming here. I told no one. The investigator was sloppy, but he wasn't a ghost. He must have left a digital trace," a whisper. One of the suited men, the one introduced as Jay, said. "Dyke is wealthy. He could have bought a corrupted customs official, tracked a credit card ping. There are holes." "There are no holes in my fortress," Min-Jun stated, but a muscle ticked in his jaw. He looked at the galley, his lip curling in disgust. "This is a message. Not of love. Of territory. He is marking what he thinks is his." His eyes lifted to Chioma, and the possessive fury in them stole her breath. He does not understand who he is dealing with now. He picked up the note, reading the words again. "I always reclaim what's mine." He crumpled the paper in his fist. "Arrogant fool." He turned to Jay. "I want a full digital sweep. Every entry point, every external contact from the staff. And I want a profile on Emeka Dyke. Everything. His businesses, his weaknesses, his patterns." "Sir, escalating a conflict with a foreign national over a woman could draw unwanted attention from the authorities," the other man cautioned. Min-Jun's smile was glacial. "Who said anything about escalation? I am simply going to educate him on the new ownership." His gaze swung back to Chioma, pinning her in place. "You will not leave this house. You will not contact anyone. You are a shadow. Do you understand?" She nodded, mute. The fear was back, a sickening cocktail of Emeka's reach and Min-Jun's terrifying response. For the next 3 days, the house was on lockdown. The atmosphere was taut as a bowstring. Min-Jun was rarely seen. His presence felt only in the increased security, the hushed phone calls behind closed doors. Chioma tended to Halmiani, who seemed oblivious to the tension, but the comfort of the routine was gone. She was a pawn in a game between two violent men, and the board was shaking. On the 4th night, Min-Jun summoned her to his study again. He was alone, looking weary but focused. A dossier lay open on his desk. "Emeka Dyke's wealth is built on government contracts and inflated invoices," Min-Jun said without preamble. "He has a temper. It has made him enemies in the Nigerian business community. He also has a mistress in Abuja. He has paid for 2 abortions in the last year." Chioma flinched. The clinical exposure of his secrets was brutal. "I am not telling you to hurt you," Min-Jun said, his tone softening marginally. "I am showing you his foundations are sand." A well-placed anonymous tip to his competitors about his financial creativity, combined with the revelation of his mistress to his very religious, very influential mother, will cause him to implode. He will be too busy fighting fires at home to look for you across continents. It was a ruthless, brilliant strategy. Destroy Emeka's world without laying a finger on him. "Why go to such lengths?" she whispered. Min-Jun came around the desk, stopping before her. The air thickened. "I made you a promise. 50. He breached my perimeter. That is an insult. But more than that." He raised a hand, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he would touch her face. He didn't. He let it hover near her cheek. "He sent a threat wrapped in a gift to a woman under my protection. He does not get to do that. No one does." His proximity was overwhelming. The sandalwood scent, the heat radiating from him, the dark promise in his eyes. The line between protection and possession was blurring into invisibility. "It will be done by week's end," he said, stepping back, breaking the spell. "You are safe." But as she left his study, Chioma didn't feel safe. She felt like a prize being fought over by 2 dragons. And she had the horrifying, thrilling realization that her heart was no longer neutral in this war. When Min-Jun had looked at her with that possessive fury, a part of her, a treacherous, long-suppressed part, had felt claimed. And for the first time since running, she hadn't wanted to run from it. The moon was a sharp sliver in the inky Seoul sky, casting long, dramatic shadows across the walled garden. The ugu leaves shone silver in the pale light. Chioma wore a simple robe over her scrubs, her heart a frantic bird against her ribs. The threat was gone. Emika was finished. She should feel elated, unburdened. Instead, she felt poised on the edge of a precipice. Min-Jun stood by the koi pond, his back to her, a figure of stillness in the night. He wore dark trousers and a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled up. He didn't turn as she approached. "It is done," he said, his voice blending with the gentle trickle of water. "He will spend the next decade fighting lawyers and his own shame. You will never hear from him again." "Thank you," Chioma said, the words feeling inadequate for the nuclear-level intervention he had wrought on her behalf. He finally turned. In the moonlight, his features were both sharper and softer. The usual impenetrable mask was absent. He looked weary and resolved. "I did not do it only for you. I did it for the principle. For the insult. I know. But," he continued, taking a slow step toward her, "it changes things. The immediate danger that forced our arrangement is gone. The balance of power, as it were, has shifted." Chioma swallowed. "What are you saying?" "I am saying you are no longer a desperate refugee buying safety with her skills. You are now a woman of means, with a clean slate available to her. You could leave. The year-long contract can be voided. I would still provide the documents, the seed money. You could walk out that gate tomorrow and start your life truly free." The offer hung in the fragrant night air. It was everything she thought she wanted. True freedom. No cage, even a gilded one. So why did the thought of walking away make her chest feel hollow? "And what if I don't want to leave?" The question left her lips before her mind could censor it. Min-Jun closed the remaining distance between them. He was close enough now that she could see the midnight depths of his eyes, feel the heat of his body. "Then you stay under new terms," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "The rule, the first rule. I won't touch you." He raised his hand, and this time he did touch her. His fingertips brushed a stray curl from her forehead, the contact sending a shockwave through her system. "That rule is a lie I can no longer afford." Her breath hitched. "What are the new terms?" "Stay," he commanded, his gaze burning into hers. "Not as a paid employee. Not as a nurse in my mother's wing. Stay as the woman who walked into a bar running from a storm and walked into my life, challenging everything. Stay and let me touch you. Let me see you in colors, not gray. Let me show you that the cage door is open, and the only thing keeping you here is me." It was a confession. Demand. Terrifying, glorious proposal. This was no longer a business arrangement. This was the mafia boss laying his heart, as scarred and dangerous as it was, on the line. "Min-Jun," she breathed, her mind a whirlwind. "Your world, its violence and shadows. I ran from that. And my world is also loyalty, protection, and fierce, unbreakable possession," he countered, his hand now cupping her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek. "I have spent my life building walls, Chioma. You climbed over them without even trying. You saw me bleeding and you commanded me. You made my mother laugh in a language she doesn't speak. You brought color into a monochrome existence. So I'm asking you as a man, not as a boss, stay. And let this be real." Tears welled in her eyes. This was madness. This was the opposite of the safe, quiet life she thought she wanted. This was choosing the controlled blaze. But looking into his eyes, she saw the truth. He was her shelter from the storm, and he had become the storm itself. And she was no longer afraid of the rain. She didn't answer with words. She rose on her toes, closed the last inch between them, and pressed her lips to his. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a conflagration. A release of weeks of pent-up tension, fear, longing, and fierce, undeniable attraction. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other splayed possessively on the small of her back. He kissed her like a man claiming his destiny, and she kissed him back like a woman claiming her freedom, in the last place she ever thought to look for it. When they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads touching, the world had realigned. "Is that a yes?" he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "That is a I'm not going anywhere," she whispered back. He smiled then, a real, breathtaking smile that transformed his entire face. He took her hand. "Then come. The grey room is no longer yours. You belong with me." The warmth of the moment shattered like glass. Min-Jun's face, so tender seconds ago, became a granite mask. He showed Chioma the message. The words, "inside the house," seemed to pulse with malevolent light. "Who?" she breathed, the fear returning, colder now. Betrayal from within the fortress felt more intimate, more violating than any external threat. "That," Min-Jun said, his voice deadly calm, "is what we will now discover." He typed a swift reply. "Assemble the core staff. The living room. Now." He looked at Chioma, his gaze softening imperceptibly. "You should go to your room. This will not be pleasant." "No," she said, surprising herself with her firmness. "If the betrayal is about me, I need to see it. I'm not a child to be shielded." She was part of this dark world now by choice. She would not hide from its ugliness. A flicker of respect crossed his face. He nodded. "Stay behind me. And do not speak unless spoken to." The living room, usually empty, was now a stage for a silent, terrifying drama. The household staff, the stern cook, Mrs. Choi, 2 young maids, the head of security Jay, and the driver, stood in a nervous line. The air was thick with apprehension. Min-Jun paced before them like a panther, his silence more threatening than any shout. He stopped, surveying each face. "A breach of security occurred," he began, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner. "A package from Nigeria, containing a threat to Miss Chioma, was delivered to this address. The sender believed she was here. Only 7 people in the world knew that for certain. And 6 of them are in this room." He let that sink in. The investigator was misled. The digital trails were false. The leak came from within. Someone sold information. He walked slowly down the line. "Loyalty is the only currency that matters in my world. You have all been paid well for yours. Today we see whose currency is counterfeit." Jay stepped forward. "Sir, all external communications from the house servers show no anomalies." The leak was not digital. It was physical. Conversation. Photograph. Something old-fashioned. Min-Jun's eyes landed on the younger of the 2 maids, Su-bin. She was trembling, her eyes darting toward the driver, Kong. "Su-bin," Min-Jun said softly. "Your mother's medical bills. The experimental treatment in Boston. They were paid for last month. A bank transfer from an untraceable Cayman account. A remarkable fortune for a maid's salary." The girl burst into tears, collapsing to her knees. "I'm sorry." He said he was a private detective, that she was a runaway bride, that her family was worried. He showed me a picture of her with her fiancé. He said he just wanted to send her something from home to let her know they cared. He paid me so much, for my mother. "And you gave him the address," Min-Jun finished, his voice devoid of emotion. "You took a photograph of her in the garden with Halmione and you sent it to him as proof." Chioma's blood ran cold. The innocent-looking girl, the one who sometimes brought her extra tea, had been the trigger. Min-Jun looked at Kong, the driver. "And you, Kong? What was your price?" The driver, a burly man, looked down, shamefaced. He knew about my son. The gambling debts. The loan sharks. He said he would make them disappear. All I had to do was confirm the package was delivered and report on her movements within the house. I never thought it would lead to this, sir. I thought it was just a rich man's quarrel. The betrayal was twofold, born not from malice but from the vulnerabilities Min-Jun's wealth was supposed to shield them from. It was a devastating lesson. Min-Jun was silent for a long moment. The room held its breath. Then he spoke to Jae. Ensure their families receive the promised funds. Their debts are cleared. Then take them to the port. Put them on the first freighter to Indonesia. Their lives in Korea are over. It was a merciful sentence from a merciless man. Dismissal, not death. So, the two wept as they were led away. Min-Jun turned to the remaining staff. Let this be a lesson. You protect everyone in this house or you protect no one. You are dismissed. When they were alone, the grand room felt cavernous and cold. Chioma wrapped her arms around herself. The joy of the garden felt like a distant dream. They were victims too, she said quietly. We are all victims of something, Min-Jun replied, walking to the bar and pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed her one. Greed, fear, love. Their weakness endangered you. That cannot stand. He drank deeply. The fortress was compromised. Became complacent. Because of you. Because of me. You softened my focus, he said, looking at her directly. I was looking at you, not at my perimeter. It will not happen again. There was no accusation in his tone, only stark fact. His world demanded constant vigilance, and for a moment he had faltered. The weight of that realization settled on them both. A relationship with Kim Min-Jun would always come second to the brutal realities of his life. The dragon's lair was beautiful, but it was forever a battlefield. He came to her, taking her glass and setting both aside. He framed her face with his hands. But know this, Chioma. I do not regret it. The distraction. The weakness. For the first time in my life, there is something more important than the fortress. And I will fortify the walls 1,000 times stronger to protect it. To protect you. He kissed her, a kiss of possession, of apology, of fierce, unwavering commitment. It was a kiss that promised safety woven from danger. Love built on a foundation of blood and loyalty. She kissed him back, accepting the terrifying, beautiful terms. The days that followed were a study in contradictions. By day, Chioma found a new, tentative happiness. Min-Jun was different, present, attentive in his own intense way. He would join her and Halmione for meals, translating their stilted conversations with a patience she hadn't known he possessed. He replaced her gray scrubs with elegant, comfortable tunics in deep jewel tones, sapphire, emerald, amethyst. You are not a shadow here, he'd said simply when she'd protested the expense. You are the brightest thing in this house. Their nights were a different world. A world of passion and startling intimacy. He was a demanding, meticulous lover, attuned to her every response, as if mastering this new territory between them. In the dark, the boss was gone, and in his place was a man haunted and hungry, who shared fragments of his past in husked whispers. A stern, absent father, the weight of legacy assumed too young, a life where trust was a luxury and love a myth. She, in turn, shared stories of Lego sunsets, her parents' laughter, the dreams she'd buried under Emika's control. They were 2 fractured souls building a secret sanctuary in each other's arms. But the shadow of his phone call about permanent neutralization lay over everything. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. It was the unspoken third presence in their relationship. The tension manifested in other ways. Jae began reporting to her, in Min-Jun's presence, on routine security matters. For your awareness, madam, he'd say. She was being integrated not just as a lover but as someone who needed to understand the ecosystem of threat. She learned about rival factions, about tense negotiations with corrupt officials, about the delicate, violent ballet of his logistics empire. One afternoon a meeting went wrong in his study. She heard raised voices, not Min-Jun's but another man's, shouting in Korean, followed by a sickening crash and then silence. Minutes later, Min-Jun emerged, his knuckles raw and bleeding, his expression closed off. He walked past her without a word, going to cleanse himself of the violence. Chioma stood frozen, the reality of his world a physical blow. This was the man who held her so gently at night. That evening, she waited for him in his suite. He came in clean, but the violence clung to him like a scent. "You heard," he stated. "I heard." He was skimming from a shipment. "Lying to me. In my world that is a death sentence. I gave him a warning instead. A painful one." He looked at her, his eyes searching for disgust, for fear. "This is who I am, Chioma. The man who loves you is also the man who breaks bones for disrespect. I cannot separate the two." "I'm not asking you to," she said, though her heart ached. "But I need to know. Mika, what does permanently neutralized mean?" Min-Jun sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It does not mean what you fear. I am not an assassin. It means financial and social ruin so complete he will be a pariah, fighting for survival in the gutter he tried to drag you into. He will have no resources, no will, and no thought to spare for you. He will be a ghost in his own life. That is my promise." The relief was immense, but it was tempered. His methods were still ruthless. She walked to him, placing her hands on his chest, over the scar from the knife wound she'd stitched. "And this? The meetings that end in crashes. Where does it end, Min-Jun? One day, will it be you being carried out?" He covered her hands with his. "That is the life I was born into. But it is not the life I am building for us. I am consolidating, making alliances, ending old wars, so that one day the fortress can be a home, not a bunker. For you. For maybe, a family." The word hung in the air, vast and terrifying and beautiful. Future. He was envisioning a future with her, beyond the shadows. "But to get there," he continued, his voice hardening, "I must be strong. I must be feared one last time, to ensure the peace lasts." He kissed her forehead. "Trust me. Walk with me in this darkness a little longer." She did trust him. Against all logic she did. But the cost of that trust was witnessing the darkness firsthand. She was no longer just a refugee in his world. She was becoming its queen, learning that the throne was carved from obsidian and cooled by a constant chilling wind. The night of the gala, the house was a hive of quiet preparation. Chioma stood before the full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The crimson gown was a masterpiece, sculpting her curves with respectful elegance, its high neck and long sleeves lending an air of regal mystery, while the open back was a daring whisper. Her hair was styled in an intricate updo, and at her neck gleamed a stunning diamond necklace Min-Jun had presented without ceremony. "A safeguard," he'd called it. "So they know your value at a glance." He entered the room, resplendent in a classic black tuxedo. He stopped short, his eyes darkening with a possessive awe that made her blush. "You are devastating," he said, his voice thick. He came behind her, his hands resting lightly on her bare shoulders, meeting her gaze in the mirror. "Remember, you belong to no one but yourself. But tonight you stand with me. That makes you untouchable. Hold your head high. You are the most powerful person in any room you enter, because you have my heart, and with it my entire kingdom." They arrived at the museum in a wave of flashing cameras and hushed whispers. Kim Min-Jun and his mysterious companion. The stairs were a physical pressure. The world of Seoul's elite was a glittering snake pit of smiles and calculating eyes. Min-Jun was a respected, feared figure here. A philanthropist, a business magnate, a shadow king. He introduced her simply, firmly. "This is Chioma." No explanations, no titles. Its very ambiguity was a power play. She smiled, shook hands, her nursing instincts serving her well. Calm under pressure, reading micro-expressions. She saw curiosity, envy, and in the eyes of a few older, hardened men, a flicker of recognition and wariness. They knew who she was to him. The night was a whirlwind. She conversed with a sculptor about the textural similarity of clay and UFFI paste. She discussed traditional medicine with a doctor's wife, finding common ground. Min-Jun watched her with a proud, simmering intensity, his hand a constant, claiming presence on the small of her back. The tension came during a quiet moment on a secluded balcony overlooking the sculpture garden. Min-Jun was pulled away by a senior politician. Chioma lingered, enjoying the cool air. "So, you are the reason for Kim's recent peace initiatives," a smooth, cold voice said behind her. He turned. A man in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with a smile that didn't reach his cold, reptilian eyes, stood there. She recognized him from briefing photos. Park Sang-wook, the head of a rival syndicate, a man whose businesses were far less legitimate than Min-Jun's polished operations. "I'm just enjoying the art," Chioma demurred, her guard up. "Of course. And he is enjoying playing house," Park sneered. "A dangerous game. Men like us, we have enemies. Weaknesses are expensive." His eyes raked over her. "A beautiful weakness, but a weakness nonetheless. It makes people wonder. Is Kim Min-Jun losing his edge? Getting soft?" Anger, hot and fierce, rose in Chioma. She stepped closer, not away, her voice low and steady. "Mr. Park, is it? You mistake kindness for weakness. A man who can build a kingdom is not soft. A man who chooses to protect something beautiful isn't losing his edge. He's defining what he's fighting for. And that makes him more dangerous than ever. I suggest you don't confuse the two." Park's smug expression faltered, replaced by surprise, then icy rage. He hadn't expected a rebuttal, let alone one so pointed. Before he could retort, a voice cut through the night. "Park, I believe you are bothering my partner." Min-Jun was there, materializing like a wraith. His tone was pleasant, but his eyes promised murder. He placed himself between Chioma and Park, a wall of lethal intent. "Just making conversation, Kim," Park recovered, his smile returning. "Admiring your new asset. She has a sharp tongue." "She does," Min-Jun agreed, his arm snaking possessively around Chioma's waist. "And I advise you not to give her reason to use it. Or me reason to remind you why our shipping lanes remain separate. The night is young. Don't ruin it for yourself." The threat hung in the air, palpable. Park gave a curt nod and slithered back into the crowd. Back in the car, the silence was heavy. Min-Jun was vibrating with controlled fury. "He threatened you," he finally growled. "He tried." "He failed," Chioma said, taking his clenched fist in her hands. "You heard me. I'm not a porcelain doll, Min-Jun. I am a woman who survived Emika. I can handle a snake like Park." He looked at her, the anger slowly melting into something else, a profound, awed respect. "You stood your ground. You spoke like a queen." He pulled her to him, kissing her fiercely. "My God, Chioma, you are perfect for this. For me." But the encounter had consequences. It had drawn a line in the sand. By defending her, by claiming her so publicly, Min-Jun had made her a symbol of his perceived vulnerability, and by her response, a symbol of his renewed strength. They had escalated a cold war into something warmer, more dangerous. The gala's glitter was now ash in their mouths. The photograph, left amidst the smoldering ruins of a warehouse, was more than a threat. It was a declaration of war. Park Sang-wook had not been bluffing on the balcony. He had identified the heart of Min-Jun's fortress, and it beat in the gentle rhythm of an old woman's confusion and the steady pulse of the woman who cared for her. In the stark pre-dawn light of his study, Min-Jun was no longer the sleek tycoon or the passionate lover. He was a warlord. Maps, screens with feeds, dossiers were spread before him. Jay and two other lieutenants stood at attention. The air was charged with a deadly calm. "He has made a fatal error," Min-Jun said, his voice the temperature of absolute zero. "He moved against my home. Not my business. My home." He looked at Chioma, who stood resolutely by his side, still in her crimson gown like a battle standard. "You will both be moved to the safe house in Jeju. Today." "No," Chioma said. The single word echoed in the silent room. All eyes turned to her. "Running, hiding, that's what I did before. It's what he expects. Shows fear. We stay." Min-Jun's eyes flashed. It is not a debate. Your safety is tied to yours and to Halmiani's peace, she interrupted, stepping forward. Uprooting her, confusing her, hiding her in a strange place, that will harm her as surely as any thug Park sends. And it tells your organization, your enemies, that you can be pushed, that your center can be shaken. We fortify here. We turn this fortress into exactly what it is meant to be. Impenetrable. Jay watched her, a new depth of respect in his gaze. Min-Jun stared, conflict raging in his eyes, the boss's instinct to secure his assets warring with a man's awe at his partner's courage. She's right, sir, Jay said quietly. A retreat now is a sign of weakness. We have the superior position here. We can turn this into a trap. Min-Jun was silent for a long minute. Then he gave a single sharp nod. We stay. He reached for Chioma's hand, lacing his fingers with hers. A gesture of unity, of shared command. But the rules of engagement have changed. You do not leave this property. Not for clinic visits. Not for garden walks beyond the inner wall. Halmiani's wing becomes the central keep. You are its guardians. The next 72 hours were a siege. The house, always secure, became a living organism of defense. Additional, trusted men patrolled the grounds. The security systems were upgraded to wartime status. Chioma's role evolved from lover and nurse to a vital part of the stronghold's morale. She kept Halmiani calm, crafting stories about a noisy construction outside. She brought tea to the men on long watches, learning names, offering a steady smile that became a symbol of the normalcy they were protecting. Min-Jun was everywhere and nowhere, a strategist in the war room. His violence now channeled into precise, calculated strikes. Rumor reached them. Park's illicit gambling dens were raided by suddenly zealous police. His key lieutenants were approached with compelling offers to change allegiance. Min-Jun was dismantling Park's empire brick by brick, using the tools of both the underworld and the legitimate world he'd mastered. The attack came not with a frontal assault, but with subterfuge. On the third night, a van posing as a catering delivery approached the gate. Distraction. Thermal cameras picked up two figures scaling the rear wall, armed, moving with professional silence toward Halmiani's garden wing. The alert flashed on the monitors in the study. Min-Jun rose, his face a mask of grim purpose. He strapped on a Kevlar vest over his shirt. They're here for them, he stated. I'm coming with you, Chioma said, already moving toward the intercom to alert the nurses' station in Halmiani's suite. Absolutely not. They're heading to my domain, to my patient, she said, her eyes blazing. I know every inch of that wing. Can be your eyes. I can get her to the panic room faster than anyone. There was no time to argue. He saw the determination, the same fierce will that had faced down Park. He handed her a small, sleek panic button. Stay behind me. At the first sign of trouble, you run, you lock the door, and you press this. They moved like shadows through the connecting corridor. Chaos erupted outside, shouts, the brief, suppressed pop of silenced gunfire. His men engaging. The two infiltrators had made it to the wing's private garden door. As Min-Jun positioned himself inside, Chioma sped to Halmiani's bedroom. The old woman was awake, frightened by the noises. It's a drill, Halmiani, remember? Like on the ship, Chioma soothed, invoking a story she'd told her. Come with me, quickly. She wrapped a robe around her and guided her toward the hidden panic room. Just as they reached the hallway, the garden door exploded inward. A masked figure stood there, gun raised. He saw Halmiani, then Chioma. He lifted his weapon. Shot rang out, but it came from the side. Min-Jun, firing from a concealed angle. The infiltrator crumpled. The second man appeared behind him. Min-Jun engaged him, a brutal, close-quarters struggle. Chioma pushed Halmiani into the panic room, hitting the button. The heavy door began to seal. He turned back. She saw Min-Jun disarm the man, but the assailant pulled a knife. They grappled. The knife flashed. Without thinking, Chioma acted. She grabbed a heavy celadone vase from a pedestal, a piece Halmione loved. As the men wrestled, she stepped forward and brought it down on the attacker's head with a sickening crunch. He went limp. Silence descended, broken only by heavy breathing. Min-Jun stood over the unconscious man, then looked at Chioma, the shattered vase at her feet. Her hands were shaking, but her chin was high. He strode to her, pulling her into a crushing embrace, his hands checking her for injuries. "You were supposed to run," he breathed into her hair, his own voice unsteady. "I told you," she whispered against his chest. "I protect what's mine too." The cleanup was swift. The infiltrators were taken away. The breach was sealed. The message was sent and received. Kim Min-Jun's fortress held. His heart remained protected. Later, in the quiet aftermath, they stood in their ruined garden wing, police and his men gone. Halmione was safely asleep, sedated. Min-Jun held Chioma, both still buzzing with adrenaline. "It's over," she asked. "Park is finished. His men are captured or turned. His allies have abandoned him. By dawn, he will be begging for a deal that lets him leave the country with his life." He cupped her face. You are magnificent. You are not just the woman I love. You are my partner. In all things." He knelt, right there amidst the broken celadone and the lingering scent of conflict. He didn't have a ring. He took the diamond necklace he'd given her, its pendant now a symbol of their night of triumph and trial. "Chioma Nwachukwu, you stormed my life and claimed it. Will you stay? Not in a cage, but by my side as my wife. Will you help me build a legacy that is more than shadows? A family that is more than a fortress?" Tears streamed down her face. This was not a proposal from a safe man in a safe world. It was a vow from a dragon to share his hoard, his sky and his fire. It was the most terrifying, real and beautiful thing she could imagine. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, I will." He stood, kissing her as the first rays of dawn painted the sky over Seoul, a city they would navigate together, from its glittering heights to its darkest alleys. The woman who escaped a toxic ex had not just found safety. She had found her equal. She had found a love as powerful and enduring as a diamond, forged under immense pressure and unbreakable. 6 months later, the wedding was a legend. A fusion of vibrant Nigerian tradition and elegant Korean ceremony, a symbol of a hard-won peace. As they danced under a canopy of lights, Min-Jun's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He glanced at it, his smile freezing. The message was a single, blurry photograph. It showed a man in a ragged suit, Emeka Dyke, sitting in a filthy Lagos bar, a newspaper with their wedding announcement on the table before him. The text read, "A king should enjoy his queen, while he can. Some debts never die. They just wait." The past was a ghost, and it had just learned how to knock. And so, dear viewers, the curtain falls on this chapter. Chioma and Min-Jun have fought for their love and won their peace. But in a world of shadows, the light always casts new ones. A ghost from the past has stirred. Is it a mere taunt, or the first move in a new, more dangerous game? Will the fortress hold against a threat born from Chioma's deepest fears? The battle for their happy ending may be far from over. If you want to see if love can truly conquer a vengeful past, if you want to witness the explosive second season of this epic romance, you must subscribe right now. Hit that button, ring the bell, and join us for the next thrilling story. Because in this world, every happily ever after has a price. And the bill may have just come due.